Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am Rob casting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, the show about something, episode number 641. 25 episodes away from episode 666, where we celebrate the pop culture hero Satan. We're going to talk about his music, his movies, his TV shows, all of those things. And it's going to be fun. So any suggestions for movies, things, depictions of Old Scratch that are your favorites? Send them in. I'm getting letters with all kinds of song suggestions. Thank you very much to build that. I'm not going to make a 666 song list. Can't do that. Maybe 100. But it's going to be fun. And it's always fun. If it's not fun, why do it? That's what I always say. I know. There's things we have to do. Anyway, I don't know if you watched Bill Maher last night. There's a lot of people that don't like Bill Maher. I've always enjoyed his show. There's not a whole lot of political shows on where he tries to bring people from both sides of the aisle and have interesting discussions of the day. I did think his new rule, which was last night about China, was very interesting. And he quoted Lawrence of Arabia. He was talking about the fact that we as Americans have become a silly people, whereas China, because of their authoritarian government, they can do whatever the hell they want. And they don't have to put up with the kind of ridiculousness that we do that has paralyzed America, leaving us unable to do much of anything, especially moving forward in the world. Whereas China basically owns Africa, and they have infrastructure projects. They're building bigger infrastructure than we've ever seen at any time in the world. So basically he was making a comparison. And obviously, from us to them, and on certain levels, while we do have a democracy and a free people, they are kicking our ass around the world, and twice on Sunday. But what's very interesting is, obviously, we need China, and China, I think, needs us. But how does that fit in with entertainment? And there was a really interesting article that I wanted to share with you that was from yesterday about Chloe Zhao. And Chloe Zhao, of course, directed Nomadland. She was the first Chinese female director to win a Golden Globe. And that's become something of a controversy. And I wanted to share that with you because I thought it was interesting, because this is going to happen more and more and more. But this is kind of an interesting article, so I wanted to share it. It is from the Hollywood Reporter. Patrick Brzezinski wrote this on the 12th of March. It was in the Hollywood Reporter. And let's get into this, shall we? Here it is. Chloe Zhao Backlash will test China's new era of Hollywood censorship. The Oscars frontrunner's complicated predicament in her home country highlights the increasingly charged nature of U.S.-China film relations, with the Chinese release of Nomadland and Disney's Marvel tentpole, The Eternals, hanging in the balance. If you find yourself the subject of a nationwide internet backlash, the most natural reaction might be to lie low for a while. But Chinese filmmaker Chloe Zhao probably doesn't have that option. When Zhao won the Best Director award at the Golden Globes on February 28th, a first for an Asian woman, the moment was as widely celebrated in China as it was in the U.S., with Chinese news outlets and social media users rallying around her success as a source of national pride. Within a day, however, the mood dramatically darkened. Internet sleuths unearthed old interviews in which Zhao appeared critical of her country, and before long, debate and vitriol over her attitude toward China was spreading just as fast as the adulation had. Beijing's internet censors were next to enter the fray, blocking most publicity for Nomadland on social media and deleting many references to the film's April 23rd China release date. Weighing Beijing's response so far, Chinese industry insiders tell The Hollywood Reporter that regulators seem to be waiting and watching before making a final judgment on the fate of Zhao's movie in China. It will depend on how she and her allies manage the crisis, says an executive at a prominent studio in Beijing, who asked not to be named because of the sensitivity of the situation. Being forced to publicly address personal aspects of identity under the harsh glare of nationalist geopolitics is a deeply unenviable predicament. But if you ask veteran Chinese film professionals, long schooled in negotiating political risk, they will tell you she has little choice. She will probably have to say something to reassure the Chinese audience, the exec adds. A source close to China's National Art House Alliance of Cinemas, which is handling the theatrical release of Nomadland, says the organization is still hoping to go forward with the release date. Speaking through a publicist, Zhao declined to comment for this story. Of the two statements that caused offense in China, one appears easier to smooth over than the other. In a December 2020 interview with the Australian news site news.com.au, Zhao was quoted as saying, "The U.S. is now my country," which some Chinese readers angrily interpreted as her saying that she had turned her back on China. The situation was further muddied by the U.S. media, which widely referred to her as an Asian American in coverage of her Globes victory. Zhao's publicist then began quietly reaching out to press outlets, requesting that she be referred to as a Chinese director. The New York Times issued a typical correction. An earlier version of this article mischaracterized Chloe Zhao as Asian American. She is Chinese. The Australian site also has since published a correction saying it misquoted Zhao and that she had actually referred to the U.S. as not my country. Many appear willing to give her the benefit of the doubt on that point, particularly since the revised statement would better fit her other comments throughout the article, which is all about the creative advantages of her outsider perspective on U.S. social issues as a storyteller. But the second quote that caused Zhao's trouble in China could be thornier, even though it appeared nearly a decade ago in the small New York quarterly Filmmaker magazine. Discussing what drew her into her debut feature about a Native American teen struggling to find his way on a reservation, Zhao said, "It goes back to when I was a teenager in China, being in a place where there are lies everywhere. Teenage angst and authority questioning might be a universal experience from northern China to North Dakota Indian reservations, but a place where there are lies everywhere is an almost perfectly corrosive soundbite to have floating around in an authoritarian state bent on shaping and controlling all national narratives." Prior to the backlash, Zhao had very little public profile in China. Even though her parents occupy a rarefied rung of Chinese society, her father is the former head of a Chinese state-owned steel company, and her stepmother is Song Dandan, a beloved TV sitcom actress. Born in Beijing, Zhao left China at the age of 14 to attend boarding school in London, later moving to California to finish high school and on to film studies at New York University. Her first two features, the art films Songs My Brothers Taught Me and The Writer, were acclaimed on the festival circuit but made no mark in China. Now, however, Zhao is rapidly becoming a big star in her own right in her home country, having arrived there via the original and enormously impressive route of first achieving A-list creative success in Hollywood. "You are the legend of our family," Song posted on Weibo after her stepdaughter's Globes win. As her star continues to climb, so will the scrutiny in China. Zhao is widely considered the frontrunner as the Best Director category at the Oscars, which are closely followed by film lovers in China. As award season enters high gear over the coming weeks, media appearances will be a required constant. If she becomes the first Chinese citizen to win an Oscar, she will instantly be a household name in China, just like her stepmother. Then comes The Eternals. Her Marvel tentpole for Disney, starring Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, and Kumail Nanjiani, which has been set for a U.S. release on November 5th, but awaits its China date. Commercial expectations for Nomadland in China were always quite limited, owing to the film's slow pacing and culturally remote themes. But Marvel is Hollywood's most successful franchise in the Middle Kingdom, and the stakes are higher than ever for Eternals now that China has usurped North America as the world's largest theatrical market, not to mention the still uncertain post-pandemic outlook for U.S. cinemas. As a director, Zhao will naturally be expected to help market the movie in China, and what once had probably seemed to Disney like an advantageously heartwarming return tour now risks becoming a gauntlet. By the time of Zhao's Backlash, explosive and unpredictable nationalist outrage had already become a recurring phenomenon to China market watchers, particularly since U.S.-China relations began deteriorating several years ago. The same internet-driven patriotic outrage was behind the NBA's moment of crisis in China after former Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey tweeted support for Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement in 2019. And a similar force was at work in the scandal that engulfed last year's big-budget video game adaptation, Monster Hunter, which I actually have right here, which was pulled from Chinese cinemas just one day into release after an ambiguous but unfunny joke was deemed overtly racist, causing a wave of online furor. Disney's China-set tentpole MULAN, which bombed in China, suffered its own internet-fueled scandals, although most of the political blowback erupted outside of China. Chinese netizens' complaints about MULAN tended to center on issues of cultural inauthenticity, but were no less scathing. In all of these instances, government censorship and regulatory actions trailed the explosion of outrage on social media rather than the other way around. In the Monster Hunter case, some online patriots even openly scolded the censors for failing to catch the offending dialogue. Hollywood's biggest content-related risk to market access in China used to be the possibility of getting ensnared in Beijing's censorship process. These days, falling afoul of online nationalists, derisively referred to as little pinks by their critics, has become a bigger and much more unpredictable concern. Some worry that the succession of recent political scandals involving China has created a perverse inversion of the studios and streamers' usual logic for courting international markets, that you win a foreign audience by creating locally themed content made by local content and stars. The fear is that studio executives will come to see hiring Chinese talent and telling Chinese-themed stories as a source of potential outside risk in the world's largest potential market, rather than an intrinsic value. It's a very legitimate concern, says Ann Kokas, the author of Hollywood Made in China and a non-resident scholar in Chinese media at the Baker Institute of Public Policy at Rice University. I definitely think that will make studios think twice, and that's the last thing you want when they have only just begun to make very modest progress in addressing the structural racism embedded in their business. In Zhao and Nomadland's case, the bitter ironies are particularly acute. China has long coveted the kind of artistic recognition in the West that the Oscars represent, but the Chinese Communist Party also remains hell-bent on closely controlling the narrative. Thus, the counterintuitive predicament of a Chinese-born director whose father has close ties to a state-owned enterprise on the brink of Oscar glory for a film that's actually implicitly critical of the American social system, not China's, finding herself at risk of censorship and rebuke. There's a Chinese idiom, picking up a stone only to drop it on your own feet, notes Stanley Rosen, a professor of Chinese studies at USC who specializes in the film industry. Much like the social media response, which featured both fierce criticism of Zhao and fervent defense of her, the official reaction so far has remained uncharacteristically fuzzy, a partial online blackout of Nomadland and Zhao rather than a complete expungement. Her admirers in the Chinese film industry are taking comfort in the fact that, asked what might be next for Zhao, a producer in Beijing said, "If people can't dig up more dirt on her, I think she'll be okay. Her movies will get released." Staunch nationalist Hu Jin, the editor of the influential state-backed tabloid Global Times, recently floated a middle ground take. The ongoing backlashing at Zhao is the price she has to pay for what she said, but I don't think it's necessary to pull the film from theaters. To keep China open means to be able to accommodate some conflicts and inconsistencies, Hu wrote in a widely shared Weibo post. Chinese audience members will make their own call and decide how they feel about Zhao and her movies. The market will put an end to it. Says Rosen, as a little more time passes, and especially if she can find a way to explain herself that smooths the waters, I think the officials will see that there is much more to gain by riding on her coattails than coming down hard on her. I certainly hope so, he adds, because she makes very creative, nuanced movies, and anything else would be quite the shame. You know, I just found that so interesting, and the idea that Chloe Zhao, who's obviously her star is rising. She's actually quite a meteoric rise. You know, I pointed out on social media how forward-thinking Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, and Victoria Alonso over at Marvel were to hire her to direct Eternals, which is finished. And apparently they really liked her take on it. And from what I've heard, the whisper stream that is Hollywood, the information on the street is that it's quite a good film. And it's quite different, and hopefully we'll be getting something very special. I just like the idea that we're always looking for new voices and new people to tell those stories. And I think it's pretty great that Marvel hired, before she won her Golden Globe, and I guess they had seen Nomadland or her other work, that Marvel is that forward-thinking. Again, that's why Marvel is one of the most successful studios in the world, is because, or ever, I know it's Disney owns them, but it's because of the leadership there and tapping, well, untapped talent to come in and work at the highest levels of movie making. I know it's for Marvel, but it's pretty amazing. Somebody took me to task saying, oh, great, minimalize her win at the Golden Globes by making it all about Marvel. I wasn't making it all about Marvel at all. I was making it about Chloe Zhao, and she has obviously impressed a lot of people with her work, as one should. I do believe in the idea of a meritocracy, and when people's good works are awarded by getting other work to do, especially at the highest level, which is what Marvel is, and I'm sure because of who she is, she's brought something incredibly unique to the story of the Eternals, which I bet her Chinese background is what allowed her to have that kind of perspective on the Eternals anyway. So it's all, I think, the best of all worlds. Hopefully, you know, China, there's a reason why in the Firefly universe, China pretty much ran the earth. And they're definitely playing the long game. And we, as Americans, should... Am I coming out as being pro-Chinese? I'm very pro-Chinese, the people of China, but the government, obviously, that's something else. And I think we need to separate the two. Their totalitarian state, I mean, not a fan. But they certainly can get shit done, which is something that we seem to be incapable of doing in this country, at least on the scale that they can. And I think that's what Bill Maher pointed out last night in his editorial. So, look, I love Chinese movies. I've loved Chinese movies my whole life. There is something in China, in the Chinese soul, that I have always, I don't know, gravitated towards. And I think we're not so different, the Chinese and us. I mean, sure, we are in certain ways, but maybe Willow Yang can write a treatise explaining the difference, because as an immigrant, she knows all about that, a lot more than I do. But I just found this whole interest. It's so interesting that, you know, the way people talk, or the way people, we really need to start to be able to get over the fact that if people said something 10 years ago, to take it for what it is. I mean, this idea that people are being pilloried for things that they said 10 years ago in passing, you know, things change all the time. I'm sure you could go back on this particular show. I've done 600, and this is the 641st show of this channel. If you went back and looked at some of my first videos, I'm sure there's a lot of things in there that might be either objectionable or turned out to be wrong, or even things I don't necessarily believe. But when you're musing or riffing or talking, you know, you're talking extemporaneously. I'm here, whatever's on the top of my head, that's what you get. And I think that we all need to be a little bit more mindful and understanding of what can happen and how things can be. And, you know, I try and say things that I believe to be true. I try not to lie on the channel. That wouldn't be helpful to me, but sometimes I might say things that are just flat out wrong. And I know I've said things that are just, I was mistaken. Not that I meant anything by it, but, you know, this idea that we're all going to be held accountable to things that we said 10 years ago and all that. And that people are going back and looking for those things to find something to lord over you. It's like, it's kind of the worst thing in the world. Like, don't you have anything better to do in your own life? You're going to go dig up dirt on somebody, so what? You can get them in trouble? Yeah, well, I guess that's what we do. That's what we do. Yeah, craziness. So, but I thought it was an interesting, cross-cultural problems that we have with not just China, but I'm fascinated by it. Fascinated by it. It never ceases to amaze me. I hope that Chloe Zhao overcomes this. I hope that The Eternals is a smash hit, and they love her in China. I hope they do. This first letter comes from Mario Lopez. Mario Lopez writes in and says, "Hi, Robert. I was so happy to see my text presented on Robservations that I gained the courage to write another one, which I had wanted to write for a long time but had nowhere to present it. Here goes. The biggest disappointments I had as a movie lover. Why did they never make the Aliens vs. Predator series from Dark Horse Comics with the argument of Randy Stradley to a movie? I think that this comic book has already been referred to by many people as something that could be a success, but no, what they've always done was several medium or mediocre Alien vs. Predator movies. Why is that? You know, I've often said this. My friend Dave Hargrove and I used to have this conversation a lot. With these larger franchise properties, we were both musing that why do they not have like story groups whose job it is to read all of the different stories as they exist in other mediums to find material to mine? And I agree with you. The Alien versus Predator story that Dark Horse first printed was great, and it should have been turned into a movie. But see, the problem is, if you're hired to work on a film, if a studio's paying for you to work on a movie, like if they hire a Paul Thomas or Paul Anderson, not Paul Thomas Anderson, but P.T. Anderson, Paul Anderson, when they hire somebody, the studio expects them to write and direct it or come up with their own story. Can you imagine if a filmmaker, like if I was hired by Fox to make a Alien versus Predator movie and I walked in and I said, I want to shoot this comic book? They would probably look at me like, wait, what? I mean, I'd have to explain it, but they're not really paying me to go adapt a comic book. And I think that, you know, I did an interview with Star Trek novelist Diane Duane, and I've never dropped it. And she talks a lot about how the studio would look down at that the last thing that they pay attention to is tie-in fiction, because a lot of it was seen as disposable, whereas the tie-in fiction that was written by Star Trek novelists is frequently far, far better. It's certainly better than anything we've been getting from Star Trek since Star Trek 09. I could give you 100 Star Trek novels that are better Star Trek than anything that has been produced since the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie back in 2009. And it boggles my mind why they don't go back and look into those stories for inspiration. CBS already owns them. But no, they'll hire someone like Akiva Goldsman who will blow smoke up their ass and tell them how, oh, you know, I'm an Oscar winner and I watch Star Trek and let me take over Strange New Worlds and make it the way I want to make it. I'd be like, bruh, you made Lost in Space, yo. I mean, your failures as a genre writer are up there. And but anyway, they don't. They don't, and it's incredibly frustrating. Let me go on. Number 2. I even like many Luc Besson films, but what happened to Valerian? Whoever read, like me, the comic books by J.C. Mesries and P. Christian never thought that everything was going to go so badly. I have to tell you, I think Valerian is a beautiful film, but I think it's horribly miscast. A very big disappointment, but one that went unnoticed, was the 2004 film Renegade, whose original title is Blueberry. Great actors, Michael Madsen, Vincent Cassel, and Juliette Lewis, and based on comic books by Jean-Michel Charlet and Mobius. The film is so bad that the estate of Jean-Michel Charlet, co-creator and original writer of the Blueberry comic book series, found the film's changes to the plot and tone, especially the shamanism storyline, so appalling that they made a request to have Charlet's name removed from the credits. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his name. The biggest disappointment of all is the film Alien 3. Not that the film is bad, but to kill Hicks and Newt in the first minute is to destroy the beauty of a film I saw 12 times in the cinemas, Aliens, by James Cameron. Ripley's death in that film still has some meaning, but the death of the other two survivors from the previous film was gratuitous and stupid. Why didn't they use a book from Dark Horse Comics called Aliens Berserker, with the argument of John Wagner, and leave our heroes alive and happy? I never thought James Cameron would agree with this, but after seeing his name in the movie Terminator Dark Fate and seeing what happened to John Connor in the first few minutes of that film, I don't know what to think anymore. Number 5. Of course, the biggest disappointment of all was the new Star Wars trilogy, but of these 3 films, I won't say anything. Not only has so much already been said, and by many people, if I start to write about this subject, I would never stop. 6. I could end with the series Game of Thrones and the disaster that was the last season, but the theme of this letter of mine is only about films presented in cinemas. Well, Mario, I agree with you. It's always a bummer when you see films that are a disappointment. And you know what? If memory serves, wasn't Blueberry film, wasn't that directed by Wong Kar-wai? No, Jan Kunin directed Blueberry. Okay, not Wong Kar-wai. I'm thinking about something else. And Jan Kunin directed it. I like Jan Kunin. So, what are you going to do? I agree, but yeah, disappointments, it's you wonder why. Why do they do this? This comes from Yakov Namoski? Yakov Namoski? Dear Rob, last time watching your show, someone wrote in saying that they were on a Western films binge. That would be, I think, our friend, the Yerk Man, adding that Westerns were a dead art form in 2021, the sentiment being that they wouldn't be made today because of cancel culture. Well, my heart sort of sank, not because I necessarily disagree, they sure are not super popular right now, but because I have such a deep connection to the genre. In fact, I felt like I was fighting a battle for its survival until fairly recently. Let me elaborate. I am a 20-year-old musician from North Macedonia, a place that seems very remote to the wonderful Western landscapes we see in movies. My dear, I love that you're from North Macedonia and you're writing this channel. My dear late grandfather was a huge fan of those movies, and he was especially fond of stars like John Wayne and Kirk Douglas. He introduced me to the genre, and we deeply bonded watching countless Westerns. What's funny is, in his days, Macedonia was part of Yugoslavia, a socialist country, and yet his favorite entertainment were Westerns made in an incredibly capitalist society. Despite the fact that the political leanings of Wayne were most likely completely different to those of my grandfather, he was a huge fan of his movies, and probably was not even aware of Wayne's politics. It's safe to say he didn't try and cancel him. But Westerns are a very versatile genre, and the Westerns that really captivated me to no end were the epics of Sergio Leone and Quentin Tarantino. To me, they were inspiring, escapist works of art and touched me on a profound level. The music Morricone made for them is second to none. In fact, 4 years after I saw those movies, I finished a spaghetti western rock album called Bedtime Stories with my band Lincoln Letter, named after Tarantino's glorious Hateful Eight. The Lincoln Letter. You gotta send that in, son. I want to play that. I want to get a copy of this. I got to look this up. Lincoln Letter. I love it. Making it was the greatest experience of my life. Unfortunately, my grandfather passed away before I could share the finished work with him. I wrote the last song about him, and I hearkened back to the old-school Americana Westerns, the hopeful and idyllic nature of them. But I was still not done, and I really wanted to cap it all off with the perfect tribute to him, so I made a Western short film as a music video with my father. It's a mix between The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Toy Story. And making it was a dream come true. It's called The Man Who Became Legend. I wrote the story and script with my father, and my bandmate and I co-directed the video. I was 18 at the time, and to me, the Western was never dead and has never faded. It's stronger than ever before. So I would say to you and every movie fan having fatigue from the current most popular superhero film genre to dive into the former most popular genre again. Cowboy films were once our Marvel and DC movies, and they were a beauty to behold. Over the decades, the genre grew into an incredibly diverse one, full of fantastic stories about characters trying to adapt to a wild and new world. I would like to finish my letter by asking you what some of your favorite Westerns are. I would love to know, as I'm a huge fan of you and I really enjoy your show. Much love from North Macedonia. P.S. Here's the link to the music video if you want to watch it. Hell yes, I do. Thank you for including that. Wow, I hope I didn't butcher your name too badly. Maybe Vesna can tell me how to really pronounce it. Here, I'm going to put this in the live chat so you guys can all watch it. Here is that music video. How rad. So, well, listen, Yakov, I want to thank you for writing in. I can't wait. I want to hear your album, and I can't wait to watch the music video. Yeah, for me, look, I'll be honest. I came to the Western genre late. Growing up, on TV when I was a kid, there was Bonanza on, and I was so into science fiction, and I was so looking toward the future that I always felt like the Western genre didn't have much to offer me. But that's because I hadn't watched it. And it was only later, kind of in my late teens and early 20s, that I started getting into the Western genre and discovering films like The Searchers and How the West Was Won and of course, the Man with No Name trilogy, which I loved. And I have to say, both Once Upon a Time in the West and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly are two not just of my favorite Westerns, but they're some of my favorite movies. And I do love movies like John Ford's The Searchers. And we watched My Darling Clementine, and I think that that's a fantastic film. And I'm a fan, and I do like the Man with No Name movies, how they spawn things like The Outlaw Josie Wales, and I love The Outlaw or High Plains Drifter. Love High Plains Drifter, and the Boddicker westerns, and there's so many good westerns. But once you start to realize that the western setting, it's just a setting, once you realize that the western is telling these timeless tales of men and women, and just like any other genre, you can tell a number of different kinds of stories within the western milieu. And I'm a fan, and I love hearing. I think one of the things that I love hearing from people is that, of course, being not American, and you watch things growing up with your grandfather, you were experiencing a world and a land that wasn't certainly part of Europe, and especially where you were. So it's great to hear from you, and I love that your love of westerns and your love of your grandfather inspired your work. That's so cool. I love that. Let's see. Daniel Hernandez writes in and says, "Hello, good sir. Very nice to meet you and the community you've created. I am new to your channel, and I've only been watching Robservations for a couple of weeks now, and I have to say I'm hooked. I found your channel through various other YouTube personalities, and like many fans of yours, I've come to say that I like your thoughts on various topics about the entertainment industry. So here are my questions for you, and if you've already talked about these topics, please forgive me, for I'm new to the scene. Question 1 is, what's with all the remakes of old TV shows or movies? It seems like every now and again I will see that they're bringing back a classic TV show with a new cast or making said show into a movie. I can understand it being an already popular franchise, and there would be less time on the audience learning the new characters and so on. But with all the great writers or books out there has to be a chance to find something big. For the studios, I bet it's like gambling on something and not knowing if you're going to get your money back. Exactly right, sir. So let's be safe and bet on something fans already know about." Well, I think you just answered your own question, but that's very astute of you. "I know for the streaming services, it may be because they need new content." Well, since now you've got a second topic, but let me address your first topic. I think you're exactly right, Daniel, that a known IP, the problem is making movies and television shows is it's an extraordinarily expensive proposition compared to, say, other things. And I mean, maybe not building skyscrapers or something like that, but it's very expensive to make movies and television shows. And if they fail, you lose a lot of money. And the people that are greenlighting these things, after all, are trying to mitigate their risks. They're very risk averse anyway. So And the problem is, the old adage is that nobody in Hollywood knows anything. That was what William Goldman said. There is one exception to that rule. Nobody in Hollywood knows anything except Kevin Feige, who knows everything. But if you're not over at Marvel, the idea is that you're trying to share the least, or have the least amount of risk in the money. I mean, the fact that they're bringing back Frasier, I mean, it's amazing to me. And like you said, there's so many new things that we haven't experienced yet. And if you look at a lot of the shows, like The Boys, for instance, I never thought The Boys would get adapted. I've got the comics. I'm like, there's no way, but they did, and pretty big hit. And The Umbrella Academy, same thing. Who would have thought The Umbrella Academy would be adapted? But it was adapted, brand new. But then again, they had something in another medium. They could look at a comic book, and if something's in another medium, then it's figured, oh well, this is it was successful in one medium, so it's been vetted already, so we can turn it into something. But big risk, and I think the real problem is nobody really knows. Nobody really understands. I think there are very few people in Hollywood that have a gut instinct anymore to know what is and is not going to work. And it's kind of frustrating. If I was ever in any position of power, I'd go out. There's 20 things I'd go get out tomorrow that no one's ever seen. You know, other things, books and comics and things I would go adapt, and they would all be successful. All of them. I have no doubt about it. I'd have to get the right creative team together, but you know, I would have no problem saying, nope, let's go make this. And I think there's not a lot of people in the industry. I mean, obviously I'd have to have the money, the backing to say that, but there's a lot of people in the industry that they really don't know. And it's so interesting because so many filmmakers, even filmmakers of note, when they want to do something, the gatekeepers tell them no. And when I say gatekeepers, I'm not talking about fan gatekeepers. I'm talking about literally gatekeepers that are going to prevent you from making this movie. People, the studios go, nope, we're not going to make this. But I really want to make this, and I'm Martin Scorsese. Nope, sorry, Marty, we're not going to make this. We don't think it's going to make any money. And you're like, how do you know? How do you know more than a filmmaker like Martin Scorsese? Because, well, you know, not all Martin Scorsese movies are hits, but it's always funny to me. I mean, we live in that kind of a world. So the question that you're asking, why so many remakes? It's easier to go remake something. There's less risk if you know that something was once popular before. Why not bring it back and try and make it popular again? And when you think about it, how many seasons did the new Hawaii Five-0 run? 10? So you can always, then again, for every Hawaii Five-0, there's a RoboCop or Total Recall remake, and you're wondering why. I think it depends what you remake. So your second topic that you wrote, the second topic is on cancel culture and why it seems to be getting out of hand. I believe we have lost the art of conversation. As we get older, our culture changes with us, whether we like it or not. Things in the past that were normal to us in that time now become a big issue today. Sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes not. When the shit hits the fan, there are fans on both sides yelling at each other. But what I like about Robservations is that you bring back the art of having a conversation, even if it's on YouTube, listening to the person who has a different opinion than you, and vice versa. I think anyone who does this comes out better. But some people are, as I like to put it, aggressively passionate, or have a form of cognitive dissonance. I've never been a huge comic book reader. The only ones I do read are the Hellboy comics. I love the Hellboy comics. While I love everything the MCU has done, I don't hate the fans for liking DC movies, but do I want them to enjoy them as much as I love the MCU? Sure. With the many problems we all face, I think one thing we can all work on is having better conversations with each other without yelling or fighting. I kind of blame social media for the instant gratification. Whatever the case is, be safe, and thank you, and live long and prosper. Well, Daniel, a fine letter. Look, I don't understand cancel culture. This idea that we want to get rid of people, or we want them removed from the social scene because of perceived slights or things that they've done to others. I mean, look, there are bad people in the world. I think Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby were bad men. Bill Cosby, unfortunately, somebody I grew up with, a man who I really liked, turns out to have a pathology the same way a serial killer would. I mean, he would drug and rape women, and they were asleep. And on one hand, I mean, I'm sure he hated himself for it, but that was his compulsion. That's what he did. He did it for decades. At the same time, he was hiding under cover of being America's favorite dad and a man everyone loved. Pretty diabolical stuff. I wish it wasn't true, but it is true. And he did do those things, and it's terrible. Someone like him deserves to be taken off the public stage. Someone like Harvey Weinstein, same thing. He used his position to lord over other people and victimize them for his own selfish desires. Those are bad people, and they deserve to be gone. But there are others that might have said something or cracked a bad joke or said something that was ill-considered at the time, or part of their personas were at the time they were agent provocateurs. They were supposed to be saying things like that. That's the milieu that they were working in. Stand-up comics, for instance, might have had jokes in bad taste or made jokes that might be considered homophobic today. Maybe they were ill-considered, but at the time, it's not like every person, every group in the world has been made fun of by comics at some point. And why is it that, I mean, ultimately, if you're a comedian, you're supposed to make people laugh. One of the things they do is stereotypes are a very easy way to tell jokes because everyone has sort of a common reference. Is it mean? Is it insensitive? Sure. Do we want to be mean and insensitive? No. But at the end of the day, I mean, if your job is to tell jokes, sometimes you're going to tell off-color jokes, or you're going to tell bad jokes or dirty jokes or jokes that are very racially provocative. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're telling jokes. So sometimes I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to go after someone for material that they, I don't know, used 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's weird. And then there's all the people that like doing it. So it's strange. I'm not a big fan of cancel culture. I think people should be able to move on and learn from their mistakes and not be dragged through the mud. But it's a weird time. It's a bizarre time. This is let's get physical media. Cal is here. Swack Props has written a letter. Hi, Rob. Regarding your comment during Robservations 639, while I agree that Sung Kang had great hair in Tokyo Drift, I want you to know if they live in Tokyo, if you've seen it, then you mean it, then you know you have to go. I disagree with the notion that no one else had better hair than him in movies. Indeed, I posit that the award for follicular excellence of motion pictures goes to the one and only Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible 2. Indeed, Cruise's luscious locks, especially under the direction of slow-mo master extraordinaire John Woo, probably made what is arguably the weakest entry in the Mission Impossible franchise worth watching. Just thought I'd set the record straight. Best regards, Cal, a.k.a. Swack Props. You know what, Cal? I gotta hand it to you. You are correct. And you know, Sun Kang did cut his hair in Fast and Furious 9. But I cannot disagree with your logic. Tom Cruise's long hair in Mission Impossible 2 and the way John Woo shot it might be the most magnificent head of hair in any movie. I don't know. I can't argue with you. I can't. JT has written a couple of letters. This comes from JT. He wrote 2. Hey, Rob, this is my first letter I've ever written to your show. I want to talk about the High Republic. For those of you who don't know, it's a new publishing initiative from Lucasfilm, telling the stories hundreds of years before the original Star Wars in what they call the High Republic era. I want to talk about the High Republic. I've seen a lot of hate and unfair criticism of it. I think criticism is good, but not from people who haven't even given it a try. I see people hating on it who haven't even read a single chapter of a single book from the High Republic. I understand that it was created to be all-inclusive and woke, and that could possibly get in the way of good storytelling, but so far, it hasn't. I was reluctant at first, but I decided to give the first book, Light of the Jedi, a try. I loved it. It's my favorite Star Wars book ever. Now, I've read every subsequent book and comic that has come out since. I'm absolutely loving them, and they've been well received. A few of the books are on the New York Times bestseller list, and they are all critically acclaimed. I'm a member of an online community which has about 1,000 members, and everyone has been loving the High Republic so far. I think the point of this letter is to ask everyone, give it a try. Be open-minded. It's amazing. Also, I cannot stand for this geode slander. People are attacking him without reading the book. The way he is written is so amazingly hilarious. He's become a really funny and cool Star Wars character. I know he's a literal rock, but once you read the book, you'll love him too. The way he's written is amazing. All in all, I'm loving the High Republic, and I can't wait for more. Also, agree with everything you say about Kathleen Kennedy. People attack her not knowing what her actual job is. It's frustrating. Sorry if this is too long, and have a good day. Not too long at all, JT. I want to thank you for writing in. You also wrote in again. You could continue on with the second letter. Listening to an episode of Robservations right now. I know Geode sounds idiotic and completely stupid, but he's just a side character and a hilarious one. He sounds ridiculous, but fits perfectly in the context of the book. Also, the High Republic was created to be very woke. That's true, but it's not actually that woke. It does not shove any sort of social justice stuff down your throat. It never even acknowledges any skin color of any of the characters or anything. People of color are just there and are normal parts of the book. I understand people looking from the outside in and thinking this is woke propaganda, but it's really not. Well, JT, I'll tell you, I like hearing from you, and I like that you like the High Republic. It's good to like things. I mean, obviously, they don't have slouches working on that stuff. They've got people who are passionate and are trying to create something great. I mean, I myself have not dipped into the High Republic. It did seem to me to be a little overtly, let's not call it, well, inclusive. And like I've always said on this channel, I mean, you're here, you're new, you might not have heard me say this, but I'm like, never put your agenda before your characters and your stories. You know, your agenda should be self-evident by the stories that you're telling. But if it comes first, if that's what you want, I just, what I don't understand is, why do people even think that they have something to tell you, or that they're on the right side of history? It's so bizarre to me. Just tell your story, man. Tell your story. Don't talk about how enlightened you are and that as a storyteller. I'm like, that's why. Give me great characters and a great story. But if you're loving the High Republic, I think that's a good thing. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, now, you know, I think the idea that ultimately we all just want good Star Wars. We all just want good. I want good Star Wars, good Alien, good Star Trek, good Planet of the Apes. I really like the Planet of the Apes trilogy, the new one. Whatever. We just want it to be good. I don't like that we live in a world where there's Star Wars movies that I don't like. I hate that. I want everything to be good. Good stuff is good. Bad stuff is bad. I want things to be good. So I'm glad you are, in fact, liking the High Republic. It's good to hear. I mean, it's nice to hear somebody talk about things that they like. William Everall is back with a letter. Dear Rob, I had two recent comments to answer, and the first one was Stubble McShave. Your question about space journeys has been answered if it's been done before. One example is the original Guardians of the Galaxy in the comics, with Vance Astro, an astronaut sent into space on a long journey, where they put him in a permanent spacesuit to keep him alive. His journey took him hundreds of years, and everyone still cheered him, but his body had been corroded under the spacesuit. The entire galaxy had already been colonized, and nothing was the same. People had evolved, and he had a bittersweet victory. It's sort of sad, but he strives forward. This was from Marvel in the 1970s. I do encourage your story, though, just to add a different twist and maybe delve into the psychology of the effect. Twilight Zone also did something like that as well, but take your own spin on it, my friend. Next up is Terry Pennington Jr. I recognize that a lot of movies, books, comics, and TV shows don't seem to have studied the basis of what makes them what they are, so they miss the core essentials. Where, like I told Stubble, it's to take your product and possibly alter it, but stick to the core of what they are. A good example of this was in the Justice League Unlimited cartoon shows. They changed some of the characters, but they were still the same character at their core, and many instances made them more appealing and changed the comics. I personally feel that characters can be changed, but you have to keep them recognizable, not in appearance necessarily, but at their core. Like, I know there are a lot of arguments over Batman killing. Yes, he did kill some in some comics, but does a guy who doesn't use guns these days choose to place twin cannons on the front of his car? This is the guy who had his family killed in front of him by a gun. It affected him so much that it consumed his life. I understand that he's become bitter in Batman v Superman, but it seems Snyder just wanted to go darker for its own sake. By the way, the Philippines is now getting vaccines, so I might be able to go home soon. I love all the PGS people, but remember, even if you get a vaccine like I have, still wear a mask because there's a lot of people who haven't, and you can still become a spreader. Lots of love, William Everall. Well, thank you, William. I love it when guys or girls comment on other people's letters. I very much appreciate that. I don't disagree with you. But thanks for writing in. Always good to hear from you. Dean Mikitich, all the way from the UK. Dean writes in. Dean says, "Hey, Rob," in the Post-Geek singularity. "Rob, you've mentioned on many shows that the 5 Disney Star Wars movies have made $5 billion, almost $5.5 billion. But that's what they made at the box office and not what Disney took home. From what I understand, Disney takes a large percent of the box office take in the States, more than they do in the rest of the world. I do not know what the actual percentage of the total box office take that Disney gets is, but for the argument's sake, let's call it 50%. So from that $5 billion, Disney gets $2.5 billion, but that is still not profit for them, due to the fact that they still need to pay back the loans they took out to make those films, plus the cost of marketing for them as well. For all 5 films, it most likely cost a little under $1 billion to make and market. Let's round it up to a cool billion. So for all 5 films, Disney only made $1.5 billion in profit. This is not bad change for 5 films, but it's still not profits for Disney because they bought Lucasfilm and all of its subsidiaries for $4.5 billion. Rob, you have said that studios don't have cash lying in some bank account they can access to make a film, so it'd be the same for when it comes to buying a company. So with that in mind, Disney now needed to start paying back their investors that gave them the money to make that purchase. Either all that $1.5 billion they made from the 5 films has gone off to pay back the investor, or part of it has. I'm also sure that Disney is using other revenue to pay them back, a percentage of the profits from Star Wars Land in their Disney parks, merchandise, and anything they're making off of the games that EA is making under license for them. With that in mind, I cannot see Star Wars being profitable for Disney until all their loans for purchasing Lucasfilm have been paid off, and as stated, they needed to take out more loans to make more films, TV shows, etc., to pay back the original loans as well as for the loans for the new content being made. It's going to be a few years or possible decades for Disney to pay back all of those loans and start making a profit on their investment. Rob, Star Wars has always been a generational franchise like Star Trek, with fans that saw the original theatrical run of the original trilogy passing that love of the franchise on to their children, who are now passing it on to their children. It is a built-in customer base that Disney acquired with Lucasfilm. That customer base made George Lucas an extraordinarily rich man, even when he was not making films, just pumping out books, comics, and merch, not just toys. So I don't understand why CBS with Trek are trying to get rid of that loyal consumer group to bring in a new type of customer that's not really interested in spending the sort of money Lucas's loyal customers have been. With The Last Jedi employees of Disney attacking those customers, and instead of listening to them, they have carried on making what they want to do, which is part of the reason the films that followed have made less money with each new installment. As this has slowly driven that loyal customer group away, The Rise of Skywalker drove even more people away, and it mutually agreed that the Disney trilogy is a hot mess story-wise and does not fit with the first 2 trilogies that George Lucas made. With The Mandalorian, this brought some of the fans back as it was far closer to the Star Wars they had known. It was also generally agreed it was miles better than the Disney trilogy, even if it does have some flaws. But then Lucasfilm announces The High Republic. That will continue the same sort of storytelling seen in the Disney films. Again, the loyal or formerly loyal customer voiced this is now what they want, and The High Republic has gone down like a lead balloon, and each new installment for it is being mocked. Like a hero spaceship being called the Vessel and navigated by a slab of rock, I've heard people trying to defend this rock with them saying Star Trek had a rock referring to the Horta. Can I just point out that the Horta is not a rock? It is an alien that eats rocks. Geode, better hope Disney and CBS never do a crossover with Star Wars and Star Trek, because the Horta will just make Geode lunch. Given that Lucasfilm is not really interested in the built-in customer base, and except for a few projects, the majority of what they're doing or planning to do is not generating any interest but mockery. Rob, how long do you think it will take for those in charge to see what they're doing is not working, and they are losing money on these projects, which in turn means it will take longer to pay back their investors? Well, Dean, I mean, still, if movies are making $1 billion, if the Star Wars movies are averaging out $1 billion, that's huge money for any movie to make. Now, yes, did they spend a lot of money on those movies? They did. Even if you spent $200 million on those movies, still making $1 billion it's good. But the profit margins that the studios are making have never been huge. I mean, sometimes if you spend a little money on a movie and it becomes $1 billion grosser, yes, like Joker was a hugely profitable film because Joker didn't cost very much money to make. So when it crossed $1 billion, I think it cost $65 million. That is an enormous hit for the studio. Enormous hit. But with the Star Wars movies, it's still 5 movies making $5.5 billion together. Yes, like you said, the studios don't get to take all the money home. They have to split it, and their split in foreign territories is even bigger than it is in the States. And you're right about all of that, but still, it's still a big win. It's still a big win. And, I think what people don't quite understand is we can talk about how we don't like these Star Wars movies till we're blue in the face, but you have to remember the fan community is a very small portion of the general public, the general movie-going audience. Most of the audience is not on YouTube, watching YouTube channels and clicking around. We're the diehard fans, of which make up a very small percentage of the worldwide audience for these movies. And a lot of people just like Star Wars. I mean, as a lifelong fan, I was really shocked by how lackluster The Rise of Skywalker is. I really was. But there's a lot of people that enjoyed it. They sit down, they don't think about it as much as we do, and, it works for them. So, which is fine. But I think what isn't understood, it's not like Disney is not making money from Star Wars. I mean, the Disney parks, once they have more that is going on in Star Wars land, they were making a lot of money there. It was a big attraction, and it's not like it's not a disaster. Star Wars is not a disaster for Disney monetarily. And like you said, have they driven a lot of their fan base away? Well, I think so. They've driven their fan base away because they haven't made good movies. If they make better movies, people will come back. People will be excited. The Mandalorian people were excited about because it felt like real Star Wars. I think that's it. The characters in the Mandalorian, like, you get the Mandalorian, you understand the Mandalorian. I think, like, from the conception, I don't dislike the character of Rey because she's a woman or that she's using the Force. It's just nothing about her makes any sense to me at all. She's just this character, and we're supposed to buy into the fact that she's exactly the way she is. She's completely uninteresting to me. As a matter of fact, I think even Kylo Ren, I know he's a Darth Vader cover band guy, but I don't care about him. And I think really it's interesting because you think about it, the only character anybody really cared about in the Disney prequel or sequel trilogy is Luke Skywalker. We cared about Han, but he went out like a bitch. And I mean that in reference to my small dog Tallulah, who's not that small. But I mean, Han Solo's death in The Force Awakens was absurd. It was absolutely absurd. And why would you do that? Why would you do that to Han Solo, one of the great characters in pop culture history? Why would you have him go out that way? Who wrote that crap? Lawrence Kasdan and J.J. Abrams? I mean, come on, boys. You got to give us something better than that. And that's what we got? I mean, at the end of the day, look, it still made $2 billion. And there's a lot of people that like Force Awakens. I'm like, none of that movie made any sense to me. I didn't like any of the Disney. As a matter of fact, I have to say it, I liked Last Jedi probably more than certainly more than the other 2 sequel films, only because there was at least something interesting in it. But, there's like a telephone joke at the beginning of that movie. I'm like, why is that? Why is there a telephone joke here? I mean, it was ridiculous. And didn't make a whole lot of sense. Didn't like it. Anyway, But if you're referring to Kathleen Kennedy, it's not like Lucasfilm hasn't been making money with the product that they're putting out. And the fact is, while you can say yes, on Disney Plus, there's a lot of reasons to get it. They really had only one new show that people were watching until WandaVision, and that was Mandalorian. And they've far exceeded their what they thought they were going to get in terms of subscribers. So it's a big hit. And that's also part of Kathleen Kennedy's watch. Look, it was a rough time because the studio wanted certain things. Kathleen Kennedy was managing all those things. I think it's all settling down, and it'll probably wind up being a lot smoother sailing after all of this. I mean, the Gina Carano thing was dumb. You know, they handled it. It was handled badly, and it was a pox on the Mandalorian, and it should never have happened. But and I don't know why I don't know why it did happen the way it happened. It's ridiculous, but yeah. Anyway, but thanks for writing in, Dean. Appreciate it. Good to hear from you. This is Colin L. Colin L. writes in. Colin L. says, "Hi, Rob. While I don't think we should blindly put anyone on a pedestal, I was rather taken with this chunk of a recent Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin interview with WandaVision director Matt Shakman talking about the Marvel producing trio. I know Matt is talking about his recent employer, but I still think the insight is worthwhile. This part happens around the 128-minute mark. I've never seen you play another YouTube page during your stream. Reading is more your thing, so I've copy-pasted the auto-generated transcript with some light editing." Kevin Smith. Who are these two figures? We always talk about Kevin Feige, but who are Victoria and Lou? Matt says, "Great question and so well deserved to draw attention to both of them. The leadership at Marvel really is the trio, Kevin, Lou, and Victoria. And by the way, if you noticed, I always mention all three of them now. They're all involved in everything, and they'll be in meetings to talk about what the Scarlet Witch looks like. They'll read scripts. They'll be involved in all of the art department stuff that we're doing, and they'll weigh in on casting. But that Victoria is primarily in charge of handling post-production and visual effects, and Matt's Lou is primarily overseeing production. So both of them have these two things as their chief oversight, and Kevin is working obviously on all steps of these things, and he's working on scripts and casting as well as overseeing day-to-day stuff and looking at cuts, and they all weigh in on editorial as well. So when I would do editorial reviews, it would be with the three of them and get their notes as we went along. So the three of them really are the engine that makes Marvel work." Kevin Smith. "Kevin being the guy we reference all the time, it sounds like from your description of the process that he was not omnipresent but involved every step of the way. How often do you see him once you get into it? I'm sure in pre-production a lot, but once you get into production, how often do you see Kevin?" Matt says, "Quite a bit, actually. He's amazing. I have no idea how he does all the things he does. I felt that he was totally focused 100% of the time on WandaVision, and yet he was also doing 5,000 other shows, and each one of those filmmakers felt he was focused on their project with the same degree of focus. Sometimes I felt like he knew my scripts better than I did, which I don't know how you do that, but he was." Matt goes on to say, "And the other thing about him is he's always incredibly calm. You know, he's never frazzled, even though he's doing a million things, and he's able to be completely focused, which is wonderful and open. You can send him a script, you can send him a scene, and he'll take it and have clear, great comments on it. It really is sort of a strange combination of showrunner and studio head." Matt mentioned other shows and movies. It makes your head spin a little bit. Marvel Studios has a couple of things in the chamber which requires promotion energy. They have shows and movies filming. They have other projects in pre-production about to shoot. They have projects that are being written and so forth. The trio must have helpful assistants and packed schedules. Anyway, I found the whole interview interesting, and I wanted to share that chunk with you. All the best. I'm going to put this interview with Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin with Matt Shakman, the director of WandaVision. By the way, I have to say, if you watch Assembled, which just dropped on Disney Plus yesterday, and the first episode, it's an hour long, on the making of WandaVision, Matt Shakman, the director of WandaVision, was a very impressive guy. I thought he was very impressive. I'm like, you know what? This is the kind of person that should be doing these kinds of things because, and again, it just impressed the hell out of me that he was tapped to direct this. I mean, obviously he's earned it, but again, it was a choice that and you just watch that guy and listen to what he's talking about and what they did, the choices they made. One of the reasons that the husband and wife team that wrote the lyrics for Frozen, that wrote all those jingles. I mean, when you watch that assembled piece, it is very, very apparent that everybody on every level that they have working on these Marvel projects, it has to have been handpicked, and they probably by Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, and Victoria Alonso. The team of I was so impressed. I'm just like, my God, these people know what they're doing, and on every single level. And couple that with or what I heard about why they brought in John Ottman to work on Star Trek Discovery, because it's a mess. They had somebody come in and, can you help? I'm working on too many things. I mean, the focus and the understanding of what Marvel is doing, and you see it in the product. It's in the product. But watch, like I've done a lot of behind-the-scenes videos, and yes, the assembled piece, it's a little fluffy. I would have gotten into it more, but it was designed to be that way. It's still incredibly informative. It was incredibly uplifting, and I found it really inspiring that there's people working on giant franchises like Marvel, because nobody has been the custodian of a franchise ever in the history of Hollywood better than Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, and Victoria Alonso. No one. And you see it. You see it in the work that they do. So I want to thank you for writing in about this. This is great. Thanks for sharing it. Yeah, because and that's, Colin. I think that's what people, when you're really into something, and sure Kevin Feige is, that's what you get. And what you'd want is you'd want all of these franchises. I mean, I've been banging on about Kevin Feige. I've been calling him our Lord and Savior for 6 years. I've never met the man. I don't know him. I once heard that he liked Free Enterprise. Somebody told me that. And I'm like, well, that's okay. Good for you. And you're a Star Trek fan. But I've been so impressed by what they've done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's not about, I wish people sometimes when you have these conversations, forget DC or Marvel or what you like better. But in terms of being able to produce something, and a lot of people go, wow, Rob, it's a little corporate, it's a little poppy, pop music-y and all that. It's fine. But look what the source material is. I mean, they are honoring Marvel Comics. They are making live-action Marvel Comics in a big way. And they're doing a great job of it. Sometimes they'll do a better job than others. But, I was talking about this to Mike Bodden. Like, when I sit there and when I watch Infinity War, and the whole opening in the Asgardian ship, and then you go into the Sanctum Sanctorum and you meet Tony Stark and it's just... It's just incredible to watch, and I'm like, this is exactly what Marvel Comics on the big screen should be, and they do a really great job of it, and I just admire the hell out of what they are doing. So yeah, and Matt Shakman, that guy, he's a real director, and he really knows what's up, and I was very impressed by him. Again, another hire. They hired somebody that knows what they're doing. So, yeah. Omar94 writes in. Omar says, "Hi, Rob, moderators of the Post-Geek Singularity. You mentioned on the John Campea show something along the lines of if you wrote it down on you mentioned on the John Campea show something along the lines of if you wrote it down on paper what WandaVision is about, it reads like something insane. This got me thinking about how there are movies and TV shows which read like something insane but still ended up getting made. Sometimes they work, other times they don't. I know you're a fan of the TV show The Prisoner. However, if you actually wrote down what it was about on paper, it sounds ridiculous on the page, but it got made and it has its fans. I've never seen it, so I don't know what it's like since I've only read the synopsis. A number of movies are like that. James Cameron's Avatar, if you wrote it on paper, it sounds ridiculous, as you have a story which is Dances with Wolves and Pocahontas in space. There are these blue big cat people, and there are these remotely controlled bodies of aliens, which the people use to live and breathe on the planet and interact with the aliens. However, I'm glad the film got made, since I thought it worked, whereas many others bash it. I love Avatar. Ivan Reitman's Twins is like that, since the plot sounds ridiculous on the page. if you write it down, since the film revolves around twins who looked and act nothing alike. As odd as it sounds, the film was made, and while I'm glad it made a lot of money and has its fans, I think the film is just all right. I could live without it. Ivan Reitman's Jr. is also like that, since the plot is about a pregnant man. On the page, it sounds insane, but the film was made. By the way, it wasn't the first movie made about a pregnant man either. Rabbit Test, I think. But I found the film to be just all right, and I could live without it. That was just something I was thinking about, since you mentioned something along the lines of how WandaVision sounds insane if you wrote it down on paper. Yeah, you know what, though? I'll tell you something about that. The idea of an avatar, we all know what an avatar is. And so I think the idea of an Avatar storyline, if you didn't even know what Avatar was, we now know, because of our social media and our computered out culture, we know what an avatar is. So it, in a way, it makes sense that if your consciousness is, you're sort of riding on another person's, like you clone these bodies, when you watch it, it doesn't seem as insane as when you're talking about it, but yeah, I think, though, that the reason that things that might sound insane get made is that people can still wrap their heads around it. And that's why they get made, is people still kind of get it. But WandaVision, I mean, it does sound particularly wacky, but it works somehow. It does. When you watch it and you're like, okay, sitcoms, she was inspired by sitcoms as a little girl. I can totally see that. All right, I'll buy into that. But yeah, they do. This next one comes from okay. Hola, Grand Robadrino. Would love y'all to do the Clint movie for whining. Goody. For this, I'll cut down the prologue and get right to it, as the cool kids say. Like my pops says sometimes, by the time you get through your prologues, kid, I'm ready for a remake, laugh out loud. Good old pops. Point well taken, though. Mainly, I wanted to write today because it's very close to the 1-year anniversary that I started watching Robservations, Elizaviews, and the all such goodnesses within the PGS communitas. In previous letters, writings, and general musings, I spoke on how COVID kind of felt like a prison, in a way, for myself. Anyways, during all this time. And this is kind of what I wanted, was your thoughts on this letter. Not only has the prison genre been a stalwart and long-standing one in its own right, but the metaphor of prison seems like a powerful one. Not only for me, but many, many others as well throughout time and storytelling. One can think of genre classics like Cool Hand Luke, Escape from Alcatraz, Papillon. Some of my personal favorites, The Hurricane with Denzel, Bronson with Tom Hardy, love that. Animal Factory, Cell Block 99, Shot Caller, Undisputed with Wesley Snipes and Ving Rhames. Also, The Experiment with Adrian Brody and Forrest Whitaker. Finally, one I think is very underrated, The Last Castle, starring Robert Redford, James Gandolfini, and Mark Ruffalo, had great supporting performances throughout, directed by Rob Lurie in 2001. On TV, some of the most popular TV shows of recent times are set in prisons. Orange is the New Black, the HBO series Oz, Prison Break. Two of Stephen King's most acclaimed film adaptations, Shawshank and Green Mile, are both set in prisons. So what is it about prisons, Rob? Why are people, me included obviously, so impacted and influenced by these stories? Is it because in a day and age when people define themselves so much by status, prosperity, and things like that make up their lives, phones, cars, houses, the idea of having those things taken away is a thought experiment we try and make for ourselves? Someone I heard once put it, the reason prison movies are so compelling is because they wrestle with the fundamental idea of what is human? What does it mean to be a fundamentally spiritual, moral being trapped inside an animal body? Well, I like that. That's really good. I think that's why I'm attracted to them so much personally, as a side note. As a metaphor, prisons are as powerful, taken at face value. As a metaphor, prisons are as powerful then as taken at face value. We all, as human beings, can be trapped inside circumstances, other people, illnesses. My left foot comes to mind. Even our own heads can be the scariest prison of all sometimes. Fight Club has been discussed a lot on this show in various capacities. It could be argued that amongst the other general themes, the whole movie is Edward Norton trying to break out of the prison of himself, and Tyler Durden is his partner in crime with the escape plan for the breakout of who Edward Norton really is in that movie. Just one way to look at it, among many others. In Barton Fink as well, while, spoiler, John Goodman's character could be taken at face value, but I've also come across the opinion that he was a figment of Fink's imagination, as a big theme in that movie is what's real and what's not throughout the film, especially in the hotel scenes, i.e. what is happening in the real world and what is just happening in John Turturro's head in the movie, something that's always really resonated with me personally. These are just some of my thoughts and musings on all of it. What are your thoughts, Rob, on prison movies in general? Why are these types of stories so popular as a genre that creative types keep going back to over and over and over again after time? What's important to learn from prisons as plot devices in terms of character development and storytelling wise, Sir Rob? Any personal favorite prison movies of your own I haven't mentioned? I left out many for sure. Well, you mentioned The Shawshank Redemption, which I love. And lastly, a few other quick takes. I also like the prison scenes in Blood In, Blood Out. And lastly, a few other quick takes. I saw your Tom Cruise Last Samurai hot toy. Super cool. I always kind of thought of The Last Samurai as the Unforgiven of Americanized samurai flicks. Genre deconstruction and examination both have the bumbling scribe archetype as well. Laugh out loud. A good death. Who doesn't want that? As I'm always thinking about continuing the conversation of art and objectivity as you do as well, Sir Rob, I came across this old and famous quote that I thought might have some resonance with you as it did with myself. Art, like morality, means drawing the line somewhere. I guess we all draw lines for ourselves, which is the subjective part, but does that mean that there is no objectivity at all in art? Are the Beatles and Prince objectively great art, whether one given person listens to them or not? Or as somebody once put it to me, what's the difference between a Pollock painting and just blobs on a page? And one final musing promise. As easy as it is to complain and look at all the downsides of the COVID crisis, which there have been many, 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 not the least of which is all the lives lost, period, all heart and soul goes out to anyone who has lost loved ones during this time. The upsides, for me anyway, are that I'm grateful to have all this technological capacity at all. And I would not have found your shows, good Rob, your commentaries, or the community you've built here. Heck, I wouldn't even been writing this letter or have anything to say at all. So that's something good, I think. Pretty good indeed. Anyways, that's all for now. Nothing but love. Always will love you and the whole communitas. Signing off for now. Okay. I love your letters. Okay. You bring up actually a lot of really interesting points here. I think prison movies are attractive because the milieu, once you strip down the milieu is both it's both dangerous and simple. And we know, talk about things that are black and white. It is I think and then it's easy to tell stories within that simplicity. And I think it's like anything else. A prison is an alien world that most people never experience. And so the idea of going into prison, it's something that people fear. And it's something that people don't entirely understand. And I think what's interesting to me, like I loved Oz. And Oz was a fucked up show, man. That show is totally fucked up. But you couldn't take your eyes off it. And the relationships and the things, I mean, it dealt with a lot of human degradation and just icky stuff, but it was presented in this way. It's like watching a science fiction movie set on an alien planet. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've told people on this story, on this show before, I had a brief stint in LA County, 2 days. And it taught me I never want to go back. But I'll tell you something. There was, to be in a cell, and I was in a cell by myself for only a couple hours, but it was just, having seen a lot of prison movies, I'll tell you the one thing that I learned about being in prison that personally, that they talked about being institutionalized in The Shawshank Redemption, but I'll tell you something that I learned, for me at least. When I was finally booked, and it took the process, it was just horrible, but when I finally was booked and I was put in my cell, this is going to seem strange for me to say, when that door shut and the door was locked, and I'm in this little room. There was a feeling of, I wasn't scared anymore because nobody could get into my cell, but I honestly didn't feel threatened. It was much funnier. The people that I met had far more good humor than I would have expected. That was something yes, it was dark and sardonic, but it was still, people were funny. But when I was in that cell for the very first time in my adult life, there was nothing I could do. My outside world didn't matter. Nothing that I cared about, nothing that went on in my daily life. There's nothing I could do. So I felt in a way completely serene, that all of the hullabaloo of daily life was gone. And in a way, there was something serene about it. I know that sounds strange, and I never want to go back, but it was something I didn't expect, because there wasn't one thing that concerned me in my real life, my outside life, outside those walls. None of it mattered in there. None of it. Not one thing. And I never felt that before. I don't know what that all means, but I think that we're attracted to the idea of, there's many reasons. The idea of going to prison, having all of your freedom stripped away, I think that's a story point that's an irresistible thing. You're instantly wanting to know, how do people exist with your freedom gone? What's it like in there? What's the world like? It's an alien world. It's an alien underworld, and we are inherently interested in the civilization that grows in and around prisons. And I think that's what makes those stories so irresistible. At least I would imagine that would be part of the reason, or some of the reason. But a good letter. An interesting letter. I got some song recommendations. William La Rochelle writes in, Raise a Little Hell by Trooper, though not necessarily a devil song. I've always thought of it. Of Piers Anthony, For Love of Evil, were adapted. It should be played over the opening titles after Perry finds his girlfriend killed by the Inquisition. Michael Ryan says, how about the song Up There, sung by Satan from South Park, Bigger, Longer, Uncut? I hope it makes the cut. That would absolutely have to be in there. Totally. Fotfom says, a couple of songs, devil songs for your list. Chris de Burgh's Spanish Train and Nick Cave, Up Jumped the Devil. Those are great suggestions. And then Scott Cozzolino writes in, suggestions for Satan's Spotify list. Rob, I love this idea. I'm not going to waste your time with classic rock metal songs that you've surely already thought of, but rather give you a list of some of my favorite alt-rock type stuff that fits the bill and might have slipped past your notice. Here goes. The Butthole Surfers, Sweet Loaf. Be sure and play the spoken intro. The Breaks, Cease and Desist. The B-52s, Devil in My Car. Morphine, Buena. The Reverend Horton Heat, The Devil's Chasing Me. Tom Waits, Way Down in the Hole. Ethel Meatplow, Devil's Johnson. Florence and the Sheen, Seven Devils. Beck, Devil's Haircut. The Cramps, Devil Behind That Bush. Beats Antique, Beelzebub. Primus, The Devil Went Down to Georgia. Yep, they covered it and made one of their awesome claymation videos to go along with it. Man, I love that everybody is sending me these lists. We'll get to 100. I'm sure of it. I am sure of it. Let's see. This one comes from Kenny Crayley Jr. Dear Robert, hey Robert and members of the Post-Geek Singularity, I'm back again with another letter, and for today's letter I wanted to talk about the pilot episode of the CW's Superman and Lois. So here goes. So many things I liked about this episode in the first 45 or so minutes. Fantastic, with so many Superman and DC Comics Easter eggs in it, like the classic Golden Age Superman suit, and it was well done. Now the cast. I've always liked Tyler Hoechlin as Superman Clark Kent. in the CW DC Arrowverse, and I liked his guest appearances in Supergirl Season 2 and the last 2 Arrowverse crossover Elseworlds and Crisis on Infinite Earths. But in Superman and Lois Episode 1, he got to shine more both as Superman and Clark Kent in this season premiere, and we see a Superman because he's a family man who is challenged and has all the responsibility of being a father and such. If this was the same Superman we got before in the series, in my view, it would not have worked, but here it does work so well. Tyler, to me, is the best live-action Superman since Christopher Reeve, and this first episode of Superman and Lois showed that. I really don't get the hate Tyler Hoechlin gets for his take on Superman, and yet again, when he had his fight with the Stranger later in the first episode, the comments on social media were like, yep, the CW jobbed Superman again. No, it's the fact Superman in this Arrowverse universe sometimes comes up against baddies that are stronger than him, and sometimes he's not going to win every fight, and they want to keep Superman on equal power levels as Supergirl, The Flash, and other superpowered heroes in the universe. Anytime you're a guest character on an Arrowverse show or a superhero show in general, you're not going to be the main character and have the power levels toned down a bit. I don't know, some people sometimes just can't understand that when it comes to superhero TV shows. The CW did not dumb down Superman. They used him in a guest role capacity until Tyler got his own TV series, and for me at least, Tyler Hoechlin is a way better Superman in live action right now, with all due respect, than Henry Cavill. Tyler captures the look and feel of Superman very well and perfectly. Always Tyler is a great Superman in my book. Elizabeth Tulaka's Lois Lane was great now. For me, she's a great Lois Lane for this universe, and the first episode of the series showed that she's a good reporter and will do anything to get to the story, and her relationship with Clark Kent and Superman is amazing. Alex Garfin as Jordan Kent and Jordan Alas as Jonathan Kent were good in the episode. You can tell one has powers and one does not, but the twist is the one who does not have the powers is very interesting, and it's well done in this episode. The rest of the cast is great as well. The twist at the end of the first episode being a Lex Luthor from an alternate Earth because of Crisis on Infinite Earths was great, and the fight with him and Superman was amazing. So overall, I give Superman and Lois Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot, a 9 out of 10. A super fantastic first episode that can't wait for more episodes of this series. And I can't wait for more episodes of the series. You left the eye out. So super happy to have my favorite comic book superhero, Superman, back on TV. Thanks, Rob, and keep up the super amazing work. Sincerely, longtime watcher and listener, Kenny Crayley, Jr. from Ohio. Well, Kenny, thanks for writing in. I'm glad you dug it. I did too. You know, I like the second episode as well. I think it's a good show. I was really surprised at how much I did like it. And I love that they just jump right into Superman having 2 teenage sons. How interesting is that? I thought it was great. So, yeah. Fantastic. Let's see. What are you guys saying? I have no idea. I'm going to jump over and see what's going on. Wow, there's a lot of you. A lot of stuff happening. Actually, let me take this down and do the filtering thing so I can go back and find what you guys... Okay. All right, let's go to a dude with no tattoos. Said, last night in between reading my hilarious tips, thunder struck. My immediate thought was William Money may once again be afoot. If you watch episode 640, you were talking about a Clint Eastwood movie prior to the thunder. Simulation stuff, probably. I think I presented to you for the Fuck, Kill, Marry challenge of one Miss Jessica Chastain, Emma Stone, and Amy Adams. I chose Amy for the Mary. She's a combo of both cute and hot. I hope George Clooney is in real life the same attorney he is in Intolerable Cruelty. Last one. I'll never forget the Man of Steel trailer where he breaks the sound barrier at the end. I do, however, take issue as a diehard Lord of the Rings fan that Warner Brothers used the same music that was used whenever the Fellowship was exiting the mines of Moria. Thoughts? You know what? I don't like it. I don't like it when recognizable music from... I mean, I know it always happens. Like the Warriors trailer from the 78 Warriors or 79 Warriors, they use the theme song to William Friedkin's Sorcerer. And I don't like that. So when I can recognize There was a trend in trailers that they were using music that wasn't from other movies, that they were really composing music for trailers. And they did that with like the Star Trek '09 trailers. I thought that was good. I like that. So that bothers me. So I can understand why it bothered you. And in terms of the Marry, Fuck, Kill challenge, I could see you picking Amy Adams. I love Amy Adams. I mean, I loved Arrival for that reason. I thought she was great. I'm a big, big, big fan. And I don't think it's a simulations thing that I was talking about, Clint Eastwood and the thunder struck. But that was funny. And I Take Back sends in a tip and says, in regards to your homework assignment, I would add Up in the Air. I love Up in the Air. That's one random standalone movie that's misplaced in my top 10 favorites. I can't explain why, but it hits the feels. Fantastic movie on Hulu. I own Up in the Air. I have it on. That's Jason Reitman's movie, if that's what you're talking about, with George Clooney. And Via Farmiga. I love Up in the Air. I think it's great. I think it's a great, great movie. And you know what? When when there's a certain revelation, man, it bums me out every time. I'm like, oh, man. Willow's here. Willow says, I am shocked to hear the news about Mark C. I haven't agreed with many of his opinions, but he was undoubtedly an incredibly passionate and important member of this community, and I'm glad to have known him. My condolences to his family and friends. For those of you who might not have heard, Mark Chure, our officially designated toxic fan, passed away from cancer. Now, I knew he was sick. It was a fairly brief bout. I think he found out about it I didn't see his announcement when he was on Friday Night Tights, and he made the announcement on Gary Beekler Nerdrotic show. I really liked Mark C. a lot. We have a number of letters that he wrote to the channel. We're going to put a Mark C. section onto the website. And I when you lose somebody, again, he was somebody that he would contact me often on Twitter via DM, and we had ongoing conversations. And I really enjoyed him. Sure, were we different politically? Yes. And I frequently found myself arguing with him, but always in a respectful manner. Like, I really felt that, like, I respected him. I respected the way he presented his ideas. He was a very passionate comic book fan as well. And I will miss him. I mean, he was one of the people that I really liked, Not that I don't like all of you, but he participated in the chats. He also supported the channel quite a bit. And I really liked him. And I was very, very sorry to hear of his passing. He passed away on the 10th. And I think the 10th or the 11th. And no, I think it was the 10th. And it was just shocking. I guess I thought that he would come back and everything would be fine. And I wish I never got to have a conversation with him where I acknowledged his illness, and we talked a little bit about it. And now he's gone. He was a father, and he was somebody I would never have met probably because of this channel. I got to meet him, and I really liked him. And it's weird, he'd been coming to this channel for a long time, and when he had his diagnosis, I think he kind of pulled back, so we didn't see or hear from him much. But understandably so, he was fighting the battle of his life that he eventually lost. But I really enjoyed him, and I will miss him. So thank you for that, Willow. I made a video about him yesterday when I first heard it. I was just, wow. Twin Flicks says, Bill Hunt from Digital Bits just posted on Twitter that Indiana Jones is coming out on 4K UHD on June 8th, and the Akira HDR replacement discs are finally shipping. Is that true of the Japanese? I have the Japanese discs. Do those have to be fixed as well? I think it's great. I can't wait to get the 4K version of Raiders. Fantastic. David L. sends in a chat. What are your thoughts on the film Equilibrium with Gun Fu? I like Equilibrium. I think Kurt, who's the guy that wrote it? Anyway, I like Equilibrium. I think it's a really interesting science fiction movie. I really like Christian Bale in the lead role. It looks great. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's a pretty good little movie. I really enjoy it. Matt Guillemette says, do you like anything about JJ's Star Trek movies? I like the first two. I'm watching the originals now, so I bet my views will change on the JJ films. You know what? I like the cast. I think the cast, I don't like Zachary Quinto's portrayal of Spock. I mean, he feels like he's angry the whole time. But I like the cast. I just think that the rest of it's got great production values, but it's just so wrong. I think that it's on so many levels. But yeah, the cast. I'll give him the cast. And I do like Michael Giacchino's score. I think the score is pretty good. Devin Hilton sends in a super chat and says, in your opinion, is Richard Matheson's teleplay for Duel the best example of a tightly structured story? Can you think of other examples? Ooh, that's a really good question. I think Duel is an incredible film. For those of you who don't know it, Duel is one of Steven Spielberg's earliest efforts. It was a TV movie where Dennis Weaver plays a businessman who is being stalked by a guy who drives a huge a big, like a tanker truck. It's this rusty old tanker truck, and they play this game of cat and mouse on the freeway. And it is such a simple idea that is so finely honed. I mean, it's terrific. But in my opinion, is Richard Matheson's teleplay for Duel the best example of a tightly structured story? It's certainly one of the best examples of a tightly structured story, because one, it's so simple, and yet it's elegant in that simplicity. I quite enjoy it, and it's not asking much. I mean, it sets up a scenario and just goes for the jugular, and I think it's great. But other examples of a tightly structured story like that, it's hard because there are very few movies like Duel. So I would say it's definitely one of them. I'd be right now, nothing pops out at me in terms of something that's simple, but that is a very tightly structured story. I will grant you that, and I love Duel. Brandon Sheehy sends in a tip and says, Rob, it's official. Avatar is the highest grossing film of all time again. It grossed a healthy $8.9 million after just one day in China and easily regained its title. Sorry, Endgame, but the great Jim Cameron's chaos magic is just too powerful, even for the MCU. Brandon, I knew that was going to happen. 3D is still a thing in China, too, and Avatar has some of the best 3D ever. And look, there's a whole generation of movie goers and fans. Look, to me, Avatar is truly a movie. I saw it for the very first time with my mom on a big screen. We saw it in 3D IMAX in Palm Springs, and she'd never seen a 3D or an IMAX movie, and she was blown away by it. And I thought what a journey it took you on. What an experience it was. And I knew it was going to outgross Endgame because it is that kind of an experience. I knew that was what was going to happen. So good on James Cameron. Good on Avatar for retaking the throne from Endgame. So yeah, I think that's a good thing, and it's good for James Cameron's Avatar sequels, which I don't understand anybody who counts James Cameron out. He's never really failed. I know someone's going to say Piranha 2: The Spawning, but yeah, okay, but. In the modern day, his track record. Everyone's always trying to Titanic. Everyone was poo-pooing him. It comes out, it's the biggest grossing movie of all time at the time. And then, of course, Avatar, poo-pooing him. Then it comes out, boom, becomes the biggest grossing film of all time. Now it's the biggest grossing film of all time again. And people are like, who cares about the Avatar movies? They've left no cultural footprint in pop culture. I'm like, it's James Cameron. Never bet against him. He's going to show you something wondrous on film. At least it's going to be really well made. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, Rob, can you explain what the New York Times bestseller list actually is? Isn't it just a small sampling of one bookseller? Not exactly what people think it is. That's a good question, to be honest. I mean, here's my mind, what I think. The New York Times used to be the paper of record. Whether it is now remains to be seen. But I think because it was the paper of record and because New York was like the cultural center of America, and literature is a big part of that cultural center, writing and all that. So I think that I'm just going to type in, what is the New York Times bestseller list? And we'll see what it says. List. Let's see. What does it say? Okay, well, I'm just going to look at, it's giving me all the New York Times bestseller, this is from Wikipedia, is widely considered the preeminent list of best-selling books in the United States. It has been published weekly in the New York Times Book Review since October 12, 1931. In the 21st century, it has evolved into multiple lists grouped by genre and format, including fiction and nonfiction. The list is based on a proprietary method that uses sales figures, other data, and internal guidelines that are unpublished. How the Times compiles the list is a trade secret. I didn't know this. In 1983, as part of a legal argument, the Times stated that the list is not mathematically objective, but rather editorial content. Ooh. In 2017, a Times representative said that the goal is that the lists reflect authentic bestsellers. The list has been a source of controversy over the years. On occasions where the Times believe a book has reached the list in a suspicious way, such as through bulk purchases, the book's entry on the list is marked with a dagger symbol. Ooh, that's interesting. Well, there you go. There you go, 200 Watt Studio. I didn't know that. See, I learn something new every day. Matt Rissman sends in a tip and says, hey, R&B, I can't stay long, just checking in to say I just saw Sir Anthony and the Father, yes, in the theater. Welcome to Florida. Wow, I can't recommend it more. Actually, I think it deserves one more wow. Be well, thanks for this channel. Matt, you know what? I really want to see that movie. I love Anthony Hopkins, and that movie looks really, really good. Right up my alley. I'm glad to hear that you loved it, because I really want to see it. Jason S. is here. Jason S. says, the word is that woke Disney employees have been gunning for Gina Carano ever since she refused to put pronouns into her bio to appease the trans supremacists. And they use that tweet of hers as a dumb excuse to get rid of her. Too strong of a woman. I find the whole idea of pronouns, I think that the first time I heard about that was obviously the Jordan Peterson brouhaha, where in Canada, Jordan Peterson was against compelled speech of any kind and was in opposition to putting in a law that stated something about pronouns, and he was fighting that, and then he was being branded a transphobe. And I thought that was quite interesting. Like, I didn't know much about Jordan Peterson, so I went down that Jordan Peterson rabbit hole, and it's clear, it was clear to me, not knowing anything about him, he was not a transphobe, and that his idea was all about compelled speech that he was fighting about. He doesn't want, and he even said, like anyone, if I'm talking to someone who's trans, I'll use whatever pronouns they want me to use. That's what you do in polite society, but you don't want to make it government mandated. And I think that got lost, and it was weird, the whole idea of pronouns. And I think nowadays, to me, it's weird that people are the pronoun issue. Like, I don't necessarily object to coming up with new words to describe people. I think that's actually kind of a good thing. And I think the idea of pronouns, to me, the whole thing about pronouns, it was more like bad grammar. Like, if you want to use a different word to describe yourself, I get that. But it seemed to me like it was just bad grammar the way things were going, when we should create a new word so people have a word. I think that the idea behind it was a sound one, that people felt like they weren't either his or her, and they wanted something to describe who they are as people. I think that's a good thing. And but it's weird to tell people that they have to, or you have to put pronouns. It's so bizarre that people feel the need to put pronouns in their bio. Whenever I do that, when I always say I, me, and mine, those are my pronouns. So I hope people take it. Maybe they wouldn't. If I put that on Twitter, people would get mad. The beep, bop, boop. I think what Gina Carano is doing, she's a fighter. She just doesn't like to be bullied into doing anything. But I do think that, at the end of the day, all people should just be respected. I mean, they have to earn your respect, but you have to respect people. And that's, I think, ultimately all these things are when it comes to things like pronouns or what the trans community is looking for. They're looking for respect. They want to be treated like, well, normal people. A trans woman's a woman. She wants to be a woman. You know, a trans man is a man. I think that is something that is okay. However, you know, that said, do I think that all of that is settled? No, I don't think it's settled. I think this issue of sports is one that needs to be really further looked at. And I think that there's, you know, we have to look into all these things. There are things that we have to decide. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, I think people are just looking to be respected and treated as normal people. At the end of the day, I think that's what people are looking for. So, Jason, you know, it wasn't the thing about, I don't think Gina Carano should have, no one should tell you or her or anyone what they should and shouldn't do. That's what Jordan Peterson was all, it was all compelled speech. Why are you telling me what words I should have to use? I mean, I don't agree with that. I think that you shouldn't. People should use whatever they want to use, and if they want to describe themselves in a certain way, they should be able to do that. But once somebody else is telling you what you should do, I think it's a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing. But you know, I guess because I've known trans people for my whole life, I've never like it's strange to me because I had a friend I grew up with, a trans woman. I didn't really grow up with her. I mean, I knew her as I was older already. I didn't think of her as a trans woman. I just thought of her as a woman. You know, it wasn't like, oh, here I am talking to my trans woman friend. She was just a woman. That's how I and it never occurred to me to think of her as anything but that. And because that's what she was. So this whole idea about pronouns is kind of, I think it's kind of strange. And I guess, I mean, I understand where it comes from, but for Gina Carano, why go after her? I mean, she was an MMA fighter. What do you expect? If someone's going to come after her, that's why I don't get the deal with her. Like, what did they think that they were getting when they hired her? They hired her. She was an MMA fighter. She's not going to put up with anybody's shit. I mean, and that's the way she is. Why isn't she respected as a person who, why? And it's a strange thing. And she was put into a position where people were literally bullying her. They were bullying her. And she just didn't take any of it. And I get that. But I would have thought Disney would have understood that. But it's we live in a weird world. Mike Prez sends in a tip. Oh, thank you, Mike Prez. I appreciate that. It is interesting to think about how the Fox acquisition relates to WandaVision. It seems like it happened at the same time during development. It seems that Pietro Ralph could have been done the same way. It seems they're making Wanda into a born witch, but that is not set in stone. Wanda could just be a witch, but there is one problem. How did real Pietro survive the Mind Stone when it killed hundreds before? The solution? Mutants. Wanda could have had a different father. I'm sure Kevin Feige has thought about it, and I'm sure the Mind Stone and the Snap has set in motion hundreds of more mutants, accelerating the mutant gene. I think you're probably right there. Like, I got into it with Campia. I said, look, man, Wanda's a mutant. Pietro was a mutant. They were mutants from the time they were kids. And it's, John was saying, no, she's born a witch. I'm going, no. A witch, you're not born necessarily a witch. I mean, she's a Nexus being, so she's different. Like Agatha Harkness, she had to learn all of these things. But I think she's a witch, and she's also a mutant. And so I think that we're going to see more of that. Will we see more mutants come into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Or have they always been here? We'll see. I mean, I'm really curious. I think a way that we're going to find out about what happens is whatever they do with the Eternals, because the Eternals are already here on Earth as well. So, and they've been around for thousands of years. And however they choose to deal with the Eternals is, I think, there'll definitely be a roadmap of how they're going to deal with mutants in the future. By the way, I'll read these. Dave Atkin became a member. Art Ross became a member. Paul J.C. Marshall became a member. Valiant Renegade became a member. Thanks for becoming members, folks. Dwayne Oldson became a member. Duroc Media sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. Glad Glad to have made a live stream. Thanks for reading my letter Monday. Chat members are so great too. Also, because of you, I've grown my Hot Toys collection. Not close to yours, though. Stay sweaty. Well, Daroc, thanks for writing in. I appreciate that. Good. That was good for you. Pookie Poo sent in a super chat and says, Rob, did you get my last letter? I hope it went through. I don't know, Pookie Poo. Are you called Pookie Poo in the letter? I don't think I've come across it yet, but that doesn't mean anything because I have lots of letters to get through. So, Pookie Poo, don't worry. Brandon Shee says, Rob, your thoughts on Zach Braff's directorial debut, Garden State. I like Garden State. I thought it was pretty good. I think it's a wonderfully quirky slice of life indie with a very charming performance from Natalie Portman. Absolutely. I really thought Braff would blow up as a director, but it never really happened, sadly. Yeah, it's a fickle business. It's tough. It is tough to make your way as a director, unfortunately. Yeah, I know. It's a bummer. But maybe he'll come back. Or maybe he just didn't have a project he could get made. He might have been trying, but I think Garden State's a good little movie. I really do, just like you do. Alexander Wilson is here and says, boxing legend Marvin Hagler just passed away. He was a big acting star in Italy. R.I.P. Yeah. Alexander Wilson says, MMA fan here and have been for years, and the MMA community has said that Gina was very ignorant for years. Nate Quarry, who fought for the UFC MW championship, tried to share with her how the election was not stolen. She blocked and deleted his number. Well, that too. At the end of the day, sometimes people aren't exactly the smartest or the sharpest tacks on the board. And we've got to allow for that as well. But yeah, I understand. She probably just didn't know what she was doing. But you know what? Ignorance cannot be held. You cannot use ignorance as an excuse. I really don't. I don't think so. What I don't understand, as far as Gina Carano is concerned, is why she didn't understand that, okay, you're working for Disney now, and you're not just working for Disney when you're on camera. The Mandalorian's available 24/7 around the world. So if you are in The Mandalorian and you want to keep being in The Mandalorian, you have to act like you're an ambassador for Disney. Rightly or wrongly, it's just part of the job. It's part of working in Star Wars. And I think it was a mistake to do the kinds of things that she did. Do I think is that right or wrong? I think no. It's unfortunately just the way of the world. And at the end of the day, too, when she did that with her pronouns, put the beep bop boop up in her, that was a provocative act. That was her thumbing her nose at a community, and I understand why she did it, but she had to know that there was going to be blowback from that, and there was. I mean, obviously, everybody knows that there's a lot of people there, especially now, the trans activist community, many of which are not trans people themselves, are very active, and they will respond if you're going to do that, if you're going to be that way, and I understand that. I mean, again, it all comes down to respect. If we just the trans community has had to put up with a lot for very many years. And if you look at what has happened to many trans people, the rates of suicide, and it is a community that needed compassion, and it needed to be understood. And there's a lot of people, and if what's interesting is, like I said, if you get to know someone who's trans, the fact that they're trans falls away very quickly, and you just think of them as a person. And that's what they want. They want to be thought of like anybody else, as people. They don't want to be othered. And I think that's admirable. Isn't that true of everyone? I mean, that's what I always say, is that we have to give people all what people really want is to be treated like human beings. And so often in our history, we haven't treated people like human beings. I mean, obviously I was adopted into a Jewish family. I've certainly heard all those stories, but I've grown up and I've had friends, all different kinds of friends, and you hear all about the kind of things people have to put up with. And at the end of the day, if we would all just be a little bit more mindful of the people that we live on this planet with, and remember that each human being, there's only one of them. So is it harder, or is it so difficult to treat people with kindness and compassion? Is that such a hard thing to do? No matter who they are? I mean, even if you disagree with someone's lifestyle or whatever, you might not disagree with the fact that they're a human being, and you probably have some kind of common ground with them, no matter who they are. Why not try and find the common ground? Sheriff Carl says, dude, where the hell is Michael Wincott? He should play a Marvel villain or something. Have you ever seen Dead Man? I watched it last night, and I thought, where the fuck is this dude nowadays? Okay, Michael Wincott's one of my favorite actors. I love Michael Wincott. Like we talked about, somebody wrote in about Oliver Stone's talk radio. Yeah, how great was he that? How great was he as Philo Gant in Strange Days or in The Crow? I love, as a matter of fact, one of my favorite movies about Hollywood is a movie called What Just Happened that stars Robert De Niro, where he plays a director in that film. I love him. I love him. I love Michael Wincott. Where is Michael Wincott these days? I don't know. Let's use the newfangled thing we call the internet and find out. Michael Wincott. Where are you, Michael Wincott? How old is Michael? Michael Wincott, he's 63 years old. Oh, my God. I didn't know he was that old. I guess he's been around for a while. Well, he was only 5'10". I thought he was taller. He's Canadian. Let's see. What does it say on his IMDb? Is he doing anything right now? The last thing he did was Vini Vidi Vici, a TV series. He played Georgina. There you go. He played Old Bill in Westworld. He was in Knight of Cups. He was in the 24 miniseries, so he's still been around, but he hasn't been acting much. The last credit he has is 2017. So, yeah, I don't know. We need more Michael Wincott in our lives. I love Michael Wincott. I don't know where he's been. Maybe he just got tired, fed up with auditioning, and he's just chilling out. You know, who's another person that if I had my druthers, if I had a career where I was going to continue to make movies, I would have put William Shockley and Michael Wincott in a movie together, like as brothers or something. William Shockley played the rapist singer-songwriter that was in Showgirls with the long hair. He played Andrew Carver. I love William Shockley, but he's not in nearly enough. I don't know what he's been doing either. Kevin the Comic Doctor. Actually, no, it's Alexander Wilson's here. Again, Alexander says, when Jameel Hill, who worked for ESPN, called President Trump a white supremacist, ESPN had to basically fire her. And Bob Iger did say that Trump called him directly, asking him to fire her. Where's the outrage? You know what? I don't know. And I agree with you. Where is the outrage? And I'm with you. I'm with you. It's ridiculous. And there should be outrage. Kevin the Comic Doctor sends in a tip and says, artists use imagery in their works intentionally to evoke responses and connections from audiences. Casting Evan Peters was a distinct choice. They knew that by casting him, his X-Men affiliation would come along. Fans got sucked in. What a waste. Well, I agree. I think that the Evan Peters connection, especially with all the multiverse stuff going on, it became a distraction that I think actually hurt the show, which was kind of a bummer. But what can you do? I guess it was a waste, but I would have liked more to come out of that, but it didn't, unfortunately, which is a bummer. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, all of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, it is time for me to wrap it up, and I'm going to do that. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody for writing in. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel through tips and super chats. Thank you very much. And your letters. If you want to send me a letter, you can at the Burnettwork.net website. Go there. We put another link. Mike Bodden made a funny T-shirt that you can buy. The store link below, or of course on the website. I think I'm going to go buy one. I buy my own merch. I do. What can I say? I buy it. I want to thank my moderating staff, beginning with Mike Bodden and the Richard, of course. I know we have a lot of people here. I saw that Louise X. Sparrow was here. Brian Halpern's here. Joshua Levesque is here. Justin Toner is here. Let's see. I said Brian Hepburn. I think everybody. Louise is here. I'd said that already. I want to thank all of my moderating staff for being cool. Thank you all for the work you do. I don't think that we're going to be doing a whining about movies tonight because Elizabeth had to work all day. So we're pushing that to tomorrow. It is Local Hero, which is the next Bill Forsyth's Local Hero. Chris Hunt, by the way, sent in a super chat. Thank you, Chris Hunt. I appreciate that. So, yeah. And on that note, I guess we'll say it. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day. And I do mean that sincerely.